everyone, I hope you're really well. Welcome, or indeed welcome back to the channel. If you are new, don't forget to hit subscribe. I am really excited about today's video. I absolutely love doing foundation test videos, and this one I am super excited about in particular. It's another one from the drugstore. It's one I've been wanting to get my hands on for such a long time. It is, of course, the L'Oreal Infallible Total Cover. I know that there's been a lot of coverage on YouTube of this already. For a long time, I thought that this was just only available in the US. And I was in Superdrug the other day and they had a big stand with it on there, and I was like, right, I am getting me that foundation. I cannot wait to try it. My holy grail foundation is the L'Oreal Infallible Matte Foundation. When I found out that they brought out this total cover version, I just really wanted to try it. They also had an offer on as well at Superdrug, so it actually worked out really well. They also threw in one of these infallible foundation sponges, so I'm really excited to try this one out because I've only ever tried the Beauty Blender, which I love, the Real Techniques Miracle Complexion Sponge is it called. So we'll also test this one out as well and see what it's like. Before we get into application and all that kind of stuff, let's quickly have a look on L'Oreal's website just so that we can learn a little bit more about this foundation and what I can expect from it. So this is the official L'Oreal website. It's a total camo coverage for up to 24 hours, ultra matte finish, but no overload. It's easy to blend, lightweight and long wearing. The Infallible Total Cover Foundation has 30% more pigment, allowing for more coverage but using less product. I want to show you the shade range, but yeah, so we will have a look somewhere else in a second at shade range. In terms of the benefits that I can expect from it, it gives a flawless full coverage base that lasts up to 24 hours. I mean, who wears makeup for 24 hours? I don't know, maybe some people do. The Zero Compromise Camouflage formula covers everything from blemishes, redness and tattoos without the overload, whilst the matte finish leaves you with an even, shine-free base. No compromise, no transfer, no overload. I am really interested in the fact that they're saying it's no transfer because I hate it when you get foundation on your clothing. It just looks really awful, and then usually it doesn't come out either. It just stays there forever. And it's saying you can cover tattoos, so that is interesting. I'm expecting it to obliterate everything if that's the case. So to use it, you start from your T-zone and blend out towards the edge of the face. This will create an even, flawless base. Then what you're supposed to do is take a step back and assess any areas that need a little extra coverage. Gently press additional product into these areas, blending the edges for a smooth, full coverage finish. This is the Boots website, and they've also got the shades in some kind of funny order as well. If we go by numbers, I'm guessing light sand nude is the lightest, then it goes 10 porcelain. Yes, right, I remember this now. It jumped from 10 to 12, and there was a big jump in terms of it being quite dark, and then 21, 24, 32, 33. So as far as I can see, there's not actually that many shades at all. And for something that's supposed to offer you full coverage, that's quite scary. So I really hope that it is really blendable. Just to check on Superdrug's website too, because this is where I got it from. As you can see, it is reduced, and you also get that free foundation blender as well. So it doesn't offer the broadest range of shades, and you'd be forgiven for thinking that every single one of those pictures looks identical, because I think they probably are. So this is sounding pretty good to me. It gives you high level of coverage with a matte finish. The coverage that I get with my current holy grail, the L'Oreal Infallible Matte, it's got pretty good coverage, but I do still need to use a fair bit of concealer in a few places. So if I can find something which I like as much as the Infallible Matte, but gives me a bit more coverage, then I am going to be over the moon. The shade I ended up getting was number 10, Porcelain. I found the shade range really confusing in the store because there seemed to be a big jump between this one and the shade up from it, and the shade up from it was definitely too dark for me. So I'm hoping I've not gone too pale. I am a pretty pale person, but sometimes when I use a foundation that does actually match my proper skin tone, I can just look really washed out. So we will see what happens with this one. Let's have a look at this foundation. Straight off I can see the texture is totally different to Infallible Matte. This is much more of like a creamy moussey texture, whereas Infallible Matte is quite a runny texture. Let's crack out their foundation sponge. It's really similar in how it feels to the Real Techniques sponge. It's quite a solid, hard sponge. I have been scrutinising the packaging for this and I can't see anywhere on here that says that you need to dampen it down first, which to me just seems really peculiar because that's what you do with sponges. But I'm going to bow down to their superior knowledge, or at least maybe someone forgot to include that information on this, but it doesn't say anything about dampening it down. So I'm going to give it a go first of all without dampening it down, and we shall see. It says to use the flat edge to apply the product and then use the round edge to kind of build up coverage. It is really moussey in texture. Oh, should we zoom you in a little bit? Feels like I've not done a foundation review in absolutely ages. If you've not seen a foundation review of mine before, my skin type is generally speaking very oily, although at the moment it's probably more combination because I have the world's driest chin at the moment, which is very frustrating. I mean, actually, although this seems like a really weird way to apply foundation, it's actually going on quite nicely. This is usually how I apply foundation if I'm wanting a fairly sheer level of coverage. And I tell you what, actually, in not dampening it down, it's actually not really soaking up much of the product. So maybe they are onto something here. This is like my hardest area. I suffer with really horrible skin around my chin and it's being especially horrible at the moment. It is going on really smoothly though. I'm so impressed. And it's nice to have the quite pointy end to be able to get in like around your nose and stuff. I know that the world was just kind of going pretty crazy over those silly sponge things, which was essentially a weird silicone makeup applicator. And the idea was that that didn't eat up any product either, and that was one of the main like marketing claims. Because obviously a damp sponge does soak up a bit of product. It kind of does feel like it's almost doing the same thing. It's just really sitting on the surface. It's not soaked in at all because it's not damp. This is another troublesome area of mine up here. I have some really weird skin texture up here and foundation always settles a bit funny. I've used up that bit that I put on my hand and that's kind of half of my face done. I like the fact that they claim that you can actually use this for everything. You shouldn't actually need to grab for your concealer, which really appeals to me because I don't have a huge amount of time to do my makeup in the morning, so the fact that I could potentially really quickly use something, I love the idea of. There's half of my face done. What do you guys think? It does seem to have evened things out. I wouldn't have said what I've got so far is probably full coverage, so I think I might try building it up a little bit down here. Maybe a bit more under my eyes. Don't want to use too much because I kind of feel like I'm actually making this go quite far by doing it this way. So let's use the other side. It does feel like quite a brutal way to apply makeup because it is pretty solid. And this is why I'm not a big fan of the Real Techniques sponge either, because it feels like it's really solid. There's like not much give to it, and that's exactly what this feels like. I'm actually really struggling to apply it using the bottom. I actually found it much easier to just sweep the product on that way. I feel like it's not really blending the product out very well. The last area I feel like needs a bit of attention is probably my under eye area because it's looking pretty shocking at the moment. Not been getting a huge amount of sleep thanks to a certain 3-year-old little someone. It does make it quite easy to go right under the eye because of the shape of it. Okay, so I think that is that side of my face done. It seems to have blended really nice in with my skin, considering I'm not 100% sure if that was the right way to use this, but I'm only going by what it says on the packaging. So I'm going to do the other side of my face, and for that I'm going to be using my trusty Zoeva 104. I love this brush. It is quite stiff to blend with a brush, and I think that's just purely because of how thick it is. And because of how thick it is, I'm getting some quite serious brush marks going on. But if I continue to blend this, then that should go away. Okay, that's actually blended down okay. It did take a little bit of work, but I think that is just because of how thick it is in terms of the texture. I'm not loving how it's looking in some of my pores on both sides, both the blender side and the brush side. It kind of feels like it's sat in pores and it's really accentuating them. So whether a pore filling primer would help with that, I'm not sure. That's something that I can try another time. I'm just going to see how easy it is to build up with the brush. Okay, it does build up pretty nicely with the brush. I do feel it is going to be one of these foundations that's really obvious that you're wearing foundation, or at least it is on my skin anyway. I do have some sort of texture issues and things to cover up. I really like how it's actually just managed to obliterate pretty much that healing spot I've got there. I think it's right in so much that I don't really feel much of a need to go grab any concealer. It's setting pretty quickly as well, but not in a way that if you continue to try and blend it or anything, it would start to mess up at all. I actually really like that kind of property in a foundation. I am struggling a little bit with it settling into the fine lines under my eyes. I feel like it's kind of accentuating them a little bit, so I'm not sure if I would recommend using this directly under the under eye area. I'd probably want to use a separate concealer for that area. I think I look really odd at the moment. I need to definitely finish off the rest of my makeup, but in terms of how it's feeling, it's so unbelievably comfortable. It's a strange one because it is dried right down. It just feels like really comfortable skin, and like I've done a really light dusting of a really nice setting powder or something, even though I haven't. So I'll be really interested to see how this wears. I'm a little bit concerned that maybe this is just a little bit too pale. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to see how things are looking once I've got the rest of my makeup on, because it does match me, but like I said, sometimes when I match my neck, I can look a little bit too pale. In some areas where I've built it up, it is looking a little bit noticeable, but to be honest, that's probably just user error, and it's the first time I've used a proper high coverage foundation in a really long time, so I think that's probably my fault. I actually prefer the side using their sponge. It just felt like it went on very easy. I think for a very creamy, high coverage foundation, it's quite a nice product to use to blend it on. I am itching to try it with my beauty blender, but unfortunately my beauty blender has unfortunately had to go in the bin because I've had it for nearly a year and it's looking very sad for itself, so I do need to get another one of those. But I think I'd prefer the coverage had I been able to blend it out with the beauty blender and it being a little bit damp, just to kind of make things melt into my skin a little bit more, because it does feel as though it is sat a little bit. I'm going to quickly go finish the rest of my makeup and I will be back in just a second. Okay, so that's the rest of my makeup done and I feel like I look a little bit more normal now. I don't know what is going on with my eye. It's just gone really strangely bloodshot. I seem to be having a lot of problems with my eyes at the moment. So in terms of how the foundation is feeling, it still feels ultra comfortable. Like, considering it's a full coverage foundation, it feels really nice. Like I've powdered my face and set it and all that stuff, but I haven't. I've literally just got moisturiser and foundation on. I've got no concealer on at all. I did notice that when I was doing the rest of my makeup, it had gathered a little bit in my fine lines, which I'm kind of used to that, unfortunately. So I swept it away with a brush and it does seem to have gone, so hopefully it won't regather in that area. One thing I did notice as well is when I was doing my brows, I was combing through my brows with a spoolie, and I noticed that where the spoolie was obviously that bit bigger and it was going either side of my brow, I was actually combing my foundation as well, and I was getting these lovely track marks on my face. Like I said, it does feel as though it is kind of sitting on the skin as opposed to really settling in it. I feel like in the viewfinder things probably look a little bit better than they do in real life. In my dry chin area at the moment, it is looking a little bit scaly and not very attractive, so how that will continue to look for the rest of the day, we shall have to see, even though I used a really good strong moisturiser in this area today, because I wanted to make sure that if I was using a matte foundation and I was having dryness issues, then I needed to make sure it was really well hydrated first, and it is still looking quite kind of scaly. My forehead is usually where I experience most of my oiliness, but as things go at the moment, it just feels really powdery and comfortable, and my blush blended really nicely as well because of that. So I am in a hurry as usual. I need to race out the door, but I will see you guys a little bit later on and I'll let you know how it's worn and what my final thoughts are. Okay, so it's pretty much the end of the day and I'm starting to lose my sunlight, so I thought I would do my final thoughts now. I've been wearing this foundation for about 7 or 8 hours, which is typically my average. I'll probably continue to wear it for another hour or so and then I'll remove it. In terms of how it's feeling right now, it's actually still feeling really comfortable, and for the most part it's still feeling smooth and silky and fairly matte, but not in an uncomfortable kind of dry way. The only area that is starting to feel quite tacky is my forehead, but then that's pretty normal, to be honest. I am used to that, but it's actually not too bad at all, especially considering I've not actually used a primer or a setting powder, so really impressed in terms of the performance there. In terms of the dry area I've currently got on my chin, it's still not looking very pretty there, but to be fair, didn't really expect it to start looking much better than what it did originally. I think this is one of these foundations that you do have to have a fairly light hand with, because it can start giving you that look of having a mask or something on, because it just kind of sits on top of your skin. When something says that it's full coverage, you are tempted to try and build up the coverage to see if you can get it up to that full point of view. And for me personally, I don't think it really delivered a proper full level of coverage. I still had blemishes and things peeking through, and the more that I tried to build those areas up, it just became really obvious and quite cakey. So that's definitely something to be aware of if this is a foundation you're interested in. If you have normal to oily skin, I would say that this foundation is a pretty safe bet for you, particularly if you are going to use maybe a fairly decent primer underneath it. I'm not sure that you would necessarily need to use a powder with it, and you might not want to anyway, because I think you'd run the risk of it starting to look a little bit cakey. If your skin is sort of more mature or dry, then I would worry a little bit about how this is going to settle into your dry patches or your fine lines and wrinkles and things like that. I think it will start to look pretty obvious on the skin. In terms of the wrinkles that I have, which are the ones underneath my eyes, it did continue to gather in this area throughout the day, but it was pretty easy to sort out. It was just a case of really lightly dusting it away. It came off very cleanly and easily. The same can be said for this part of my nose where my glasses sit as well. It all gathered there, and on my nose pads as well. So I think in future I would probably just avoid that area for putting foundation on. I am looking forward to experimenting with this one again. I think I'm going to maybe try using a different primer, maybe a pore filling primer, because my most obvious pores are either side of my nose in sort of this area, and I do feel right from the get-go this foundation just sat in those pores and didn't budge, and no amount of blending made any difference to that, and obviously that's not really changed throughout the day. So I think when I try this again, I will need to try some kind of pore filling primer just to see if I can get a little bit more of a smoother finish. But in terms of how it's feeling really comfortable and silky smooth and lightweight, and that is pretty much what they promised it to be. So I am excited to experiment with this one again, because it does feel really nice on the skin, and I have tried things that are so much more expensive than this that have just been a lot worse. So this one is definitely worth trying again. I really hope that you enjoyed the video and found it useful. If you did, I would really appreciate a thumbs up down below, because it really helps support my channel. And if you are new here, I'll pop a button just here so you can click it and get notified of new content as and when it gets uploaded. And I will pop a link to my last video just up here, so if you've not seen it, you can click it and check that one out too. Anyway, I hope you're all doing really well, and I will see you again soon. Bye!